and we begin this hour with President Trump's first major international trip of his second term, with the goal of securing some major deals. The trip comes as the president announced a 90-day pause on those retaliatory tariffs with China, which sent Wall Street rallying. Right now, as you can see, green across the board as investors are hoping for even more good news. The president's Middle East trip also comes on the heels of the release of an Israeli-American hostage taken by Hamas during that October 7th attack on Israel. 21-year-old Idan Alexander was just released this morning and is the last living American hostage. NewsNation's Joe Khalil is live for us outside of the White House. And Joe, Idan Alexander is now in the hands of the IDF.
Yeah, that's right, Nicole. We've just learned he is officially on his way right now to see his family. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, confirmed that about an hour and a half ago, he was released from Hamas custody to the Red Cross and eventually to the IDF. So he is crossing into Israeli territory. Now his next stop is going to be a medical facility where he's going to get a physical exam, which is typical of hostages that are released. And at that facility waiting for him is his mother. We know that because the IDF released a picture of his mother waiting. So really hard even to wrap your head around how emotional that moment, that reunion is going to be. 19 months this family was without their son in these circumstances, taken hostage. President Trump talked about this earlier today. Israeli officials talked about this earlier today as well. The Israeli officials confirmed pretty much that they didn't have a hand in negotiating this. This was a two-way negotiation between Hamas and the United States. But the Israeli officials did say they felt Hamas did this as a sign of goodwill in some way, trying to build some goodwill ahead of President Trump making that important trip to the Middle East, where a harder negotiation is going to have to begin. And that is between Hamas and Israel for a ceasefire agreement that would potentially release the remaining hostages and would also provide for a ceasefire that allowed aid to get into Gaza for the families and the children there who in some cases say they are going through starvation right now. So that is the bigger negotiation President Trump has on his way. Take a listen earlier to the comments he made regarding Idan Alexander.
We hope that we're going to have other hostages released too, as you know. So when I met with the hostages 3 weeks ago that were there for quite a while, you remember the 10 people that came in, mostly young people, 1 or 2 were a little bit older. They were explaining the trials and tribulations. I mean, they went through hell.
President Trump earlier said there were 59 remaining hostages. That included Alexander, so presumably 58. We have had conflicting numbers from the White House and from Prime Minister Netanyahu about how many hostages they believe are still alive. Somewhere between 20 and 23 now is the number for living hostages, the expectation anyway, Nicole.
All right. And Joe, we know that the president right now heading to the Middle East, he's going to be meeting with leaders of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates. What is the White House saying is the goal of this week-long trip or goals?
Yeah, twofold. One, national security implications, and we talked about potential ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel. That is on the table. But this is also largely an economic trip for President Trump, hoping to secure some trade deals with Qatar specifically. The White House believing there could be anywhere up to $1 trillion worth of trade deals without getting into specifics about how you get there. So those things are on the table. The question of Iran also on the table. Before October 7th, there was a process to try to get Saudi Arabia to normalize its relationship with Iran. Negotiators were getting closer, and there's an effort now to try to renew that, and also discussion about Iran's nuclear program. All of those things on the table for President Trump as he goes for a very high-stakes trip, his first overseas trip in his second term.
All right, Joe Khalil live for us there at the White House. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.